Ah, Christmas. The time of year when we celebrate loving our fellow humans.
Now you got people being left out in the cold and cost of living crisis.
When we can come together, forget our differences, and live happily as one.
Seriously?
And when we share our wealth and resources, so that all our cups may runneth over. My favourite time of the year! Just before we get into the video, I want to, as always, thank my patrons for their continued support. None of the videos I make could be possible without you. If you aren't already subscribed to the Patreon, please consider doing so, as it really helps me out with my bills, my rent, living costs, and yes, I have a son now. So you aren't just starving me if you don't give me money.
You're starving him.
Just kidding, I would never let that happen, obviously, but he's a rescue, and it would be really nice to be able to afford some toys and new beds for him and stuff. He really didn't come with a lot of stuff, so think of the boy. Please think of the boy. Anyway, there are tons of options to support me, from as little as £2 a month to £30 a month. You can enjoy benefits from each tier, such as having your name in the credits of the video, or at the other end, getting a sweet anarchist pin badge and a unique sketch drawn by me, myself, alongside your name in the credits. Amazing. Go to patreon.com/djmuel for more information, and the link will be in the description below. Landlords are easily one of the most egregious characters in the story of existence, and I use the very literal definition of the word character here that renowned French author and university professor Patrice Pavis used in a 1994 paper, in that landlords give the illusion of being a person. There's my cited source for the video, so you know, I can't be accused of plagiarism. Okay, fine, that was also a Stuart Lee bit. I genuinely have no idea how someone can think that this makes you look like a good and righteous person. Like, you are a shell of a human, a vile and disgusting man who thinks that unjustified violence and control over someone's living situation is acceptable. For context, this is Samuel Leeds, the first of the bastard landlord influencers that we're going to look at in this brand new video series. And he is, by all accounts, a proper bastard. Samuel rose to infamy recently when he lied about evicting a tenant who didn't pay rent on time and filmed himself chainsawing through the tenant's door. There was no tenant in the property at this time, and by golly, there better not have been, because I can tell you right now, not only would have that been an illegal eviction, but it wouldn't have looked very good for him in court regardless of how much rent was in arrears. In the preface to one of his books, it's a pamphlet, Samuel says this about himself.
Samuel Leeds started his property journey in 2008 with nothing. Within 3 years, he was financially free and had built up £1 million property portfolio by the age of 21. Post-financial freedom, Samuel has travelled the world, set up many charitable projects in Africa, and written 4 #1 Amazon best-selling books.
Now, there's a word in the script coming up that I'm not quite sure how you actually say, so I'm just going to say Wikipedia because it sounds right and it's easier to say, and I just can't be bothered checking because it's a nonsense website. But when you look at his Wikipedia page, yes, the version of Wikipedia that only verified people can say things about themselves on, it says that at age 17, the bank financed him. Sorry, which bank? Are we just leaving that out then? It seems like he didn't really do this by himself then, did he? There's also this post on Property Tribes that claims that Samuel said that he got £125,000 from family members. There's also a video attached here, which I'm going to play for you now.
In my first 4 years of being in property, so from the ages of, I'm starting at 17, so from the ages of 17 up until 21, I borrowed from family and friends, not banks, not mortgages, but borrowed actual hard cash in my bank from friends and family, £125,000.
Financially free is also an interesting term, isn't it? Kind of implies that you can't be free in society unless you earn a lot of money. Interesting. I wonder if there are any ideologies that deal with that kind of thing specifically. But he probably just means, like most people, free from a mortgage, as I assume that he was living at home when he started out based on what scant information the Wikipedia page has. And Samuel most likely paid off that mortgage by doing some of the awful things I'm going to talk about in a bit. Samuel's whole thing is that he is a business mentor with one of those websites that tells you he's going to make you very rich if you just sign up to his very cheap course and sign up to his newsletter and download his books. They're pamphlets. What could go wrong? Well, it could go wrong when he sells your data to third parties and then you've got spam mail coming out your ears and getting cold calls for weeks, and then you reach the end of his course and realize you can't do any of the things that he's advising you to do without a lot of money up front, so you take a loan out from the bank, but then the bank realizes that you're using a personal loan for business purposes, and then they shaft you even harder, and then things are much worse off than when you started, and it's actually not that easy at all, and it costs you a lot of money, and you're very much in debt, and things are very bad. On his Twitter, there are a bunch of videos of him talking about how he's going to make you rich using other people's money, along with some images of him and his partner aboard a yacht somewhere sunny and warm. If you scroll for like a bit, things devolve pretty quickly to a weird place of misogyny and praising Andrew Tate for helping him lose weight. Somehow. Then if you go to his website, you start to see some other weird stuff. Yeah. Like that. Also, his website just like really doesn't run that well and seems to take an age to load anything, but this is just me being petty. That would be acceptable if it weren't for this other stuff. But before we go into that, let's take a look at some of the bad practices that Samuel engages in and encourages his students to take part in that make him one of the most horrible bastard landlord influencers I've ever seen. This is something I've covered on my streams before, but Samuel Leeds loves to scream from the rooftops about how you can make money using other people's money without ever having bought a property in your life. And one of those pieces of advice is called rent to rent. And if you're thinking, no, that can't be what I think it is, no, surely not. Well, I'm afraid to say it is. You're right. And it sucks. Rent to rent is when you become a tenant in a property and then sublet that property to someone else for more rent than what you're paying. If you're unaware of the housing market in the UK, from my experience with Greater Manchester Tenants Union, we commonly come across landlords who don't live in the country. But even if they do, they use letting agents and property managers to look after the property. And I don't mean look after it for the tenants, I mean looking after it for the landlord. So basically, they never inspect the property. Unless there's something hellishly illegal going on that they're already doing. Like, for example, it's a house with multiple occupants with no license, so they come round all the time to make sure that the bins aren't overflowing and attracting rats, which in turn attracts the council and the neighbours, and then the council comes round and speaks to one of the tenants and says, what are you doing? You're attracting rats, this is your responsibility. And then the tenant goes, actually no, it's the landlord's responsibility. And then the councillor goes, oh, landlord. And then the landlord gets a massive fine, not just for the rats, but also for not having a HMO license. And then the tenant is also owed a hell of a lot of rent back. Nice little tidbit for you there, tidbit of information from my experience in dealing with crappy, greedy landlords. So these landlords that are super passive and never come to the property, and the letting agents and property managers who don't either, essentially make it possible for rent to rent to be a widespread problem such as it is. But wait, Mule, I got a tenancy agreement from my landlord. Surely that means that everything is good and legit and above board. Wrong! Tenancy agreements do not mean that your landlord is not a rent-to-rent landlord. They would need, actually, a tenancy agreement to either appear legitimate if they're breaking the law, or if they are legitimate, it's important for tenants' legal protections to have one. And landlords could trip over their proverbial shoelaces legally if they fail to present you with one. Also, in the UK, for example, lots of landlords don't even get a solicitor to draw up a tenancy agreement. They just kind of make them up themselves. There has to be a kind of tenancy agreement if you're letting out a property that you don't live in. You kind of need to have some kind of one with some specific bits in it, but what really defines a tenancy is the relationship that you have to your landlord. To be clear, most assured short-hold tenancy agreements do not allow subletting, but if the tenancy agreement states that subletting is allowed, then it is legal, most of the time with some caveats from the landlord in there. In the cases where it's illegal, it's not so that the tenant can be protected, it's because subletting harms the landlord's profits. But realistically, people break the law, and the people who watch Samuel Leeds content are probably going to end up breaking the law, because he doesn't really explain things properly most of the time, and encourages people to do absolutely insane things, based on the fact that it will make them thousands of pounds richer, and he's doing it, so it must be okay. This is where we have to be very aware of the power that influencers have. You have to be absolutely explicit in the content that you make, what your intentions are, and how you want people to act. It's no good saying that people shouldn't break the law in one video if in the next video about the exact same thing, you don't mention the law at all. The long and short of it is that people can get away with doing rent-to-rent illegally, because let's face it, as long as the landlord and letting agent are getting their cash, they don't care who you're abusing in order to get it. Landlords and letting agents are famous for not doing any work at all and just love to collect that passive income. The first flat I ever rented, the landlord didn't even meet him, never met him, not once in my life. Most leftists agree that landlords are a problem. How much of a problem and what people want to do with them is up for discussion. But most of us agree on this. But what's worse than a landlord? Someone pretending to be one who is maybe living in the same house as you for free, and what's more, profiting from your rent. If you want more advice about subletting in the UK and what you can do about it, I'd recommend reading this page from the Citizens Advice website. I'll leave a link to that down in the description below. So what does Samuel say about rent-to-rent? To be fair to him, in some of his videos he does mention that rent-to-rent is illegal under most AST contracts and you'll need the landlord's permission to do it. He also states that if you want to make it easier for yourself, you'll need to use a corporate let agreement to do it all kosher. But setting one of these up is not so simple. You'll need to get set up as an incorporated business, get set up on PAYE, register as an incorporated business on Companies House. It's a bit of a faff, and you could wing your way through it, but the average person who watches Samuel's videos is just going to want to skip all that and use the lax letting agents and landlords that we discussed previously in order to get around the law and do it that way. I guarantee he includes this info in the videos as a disclaimer to cover his own ass because he knows his advice will lead to people doing this stuff. Especially considering this is the way he behaves on social media. When you go to his website, there are a bunch of rent-to-rent blog posts, but if you go to the main segment about training for rent-to-rent, he advertises his free guide, which he makes out to look like a book, but it's 12 pages long and has the biggest text I've ever seen on the pages. And when you download it, there is absolutely no mention of what is legal or illegal in this guide. There's just this one schneidi passage that says,
"My definition of rent-to-rent is paying a guaranteed rent for a property that you legally rent out yourself for a higher amount, and then you keep that difference as profit."
Come on, man, that legally is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. There's no explanation how to do it legally, he's just saying that to cover his ass. The problem with this is if you just hear about rent-to-rent from Samuel's videos or his websites, you might Google it and come across this website, for example, where even if you scroll right down to the bit where it says, "Is rent-to-rent legal?" it just has in bold letters, "Yes, rent-to-rent is legal," but doesn't go into much detail about the actual legality of it and what you need to do in order to make it legal. The problem is, whether it is or not, legality does not define morality. And in the animal kingdom, the parasites of parasites are commonly referred to be engaging in what is known as hyperparasitism. And that is, in my opinion, how we should refer to rent-to-rent landlords.
So here's the message I'm going to write. I'm going to say, so hey, I've just seen your property on spare room. Would you be interested in receiving a fixed guaranteed rent or maybe selling your property altogether? If so, please text back and let's jump on a quick call. Samuel. Boom.
What kind of fantasy world does he live in where landlords are going to accept a low guaranteed rent from a random person or even a business that advertises itself as a corporate property investment company that prides itself on charging more rent to tenants to make its profit?
Absolutely fantastic. Are you the landlord? Do you own the apartment?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah. So I've got a company. So it would be a corporate let. I don't know if that's something that you've done before with this particular property. But I could look round. I could do Tuesday or Thursday next week if either of those are any good.
Tuesday would work well.
I'm convinced this guy on the phone with him is his mate and they've just planned this whole thing. It's so completely absurd, and actually more likely that upon hearing this, the landlord is just going to put the phone down and charge more rent for their property without him. This is what makes me think that the only success stories of this kind is when people break the law. Like this one guy from 2016 who, let's face it, only got found out because of how absurdly obtuse he was being about it. Doing an entire HMO as a rent-to-rent subletting scam? You've got to admire the balls on him, but that motherfucker definitely made some people homeless. So, yeah, rot. Not to mention, you're more often than not going to need a lot of money up front if you're going to rent an entire house. And as soon as a landlord finds out that you're a corporate renter, they're going to want to charge a lot more upfront and monthly. So your return on investment that Samuel insists needs to be 100% or £500 a month at least if you're doing rent to rent, is going to be pretty damn low. He really does make out that you can lift yourself up by the proverbial bootstraps, and any working class person can do this with no money. But then talks about needing a lot of money for things like deposits, rent up front, other such investments such as furniture, and needing to pay bills and rent for vacancy periods. His free advice and courses are full of this stuff, but if you want that special, accelerated version, oh, that'll cost you a cool $3,995. Now, how exactly are you supposed to afford that if you have nothing, like Samuel himself apparently had when he started out? He doesn't even have empathy for people who are in the same position that he claimed to be in. Samuel Leeds' advice seems to amount to be a complete turnip, exploit others, skirt the vague boundaries of legality in order to earn a few quid at the expense of vulnerable people who don't know their rights, and what's more, do it lots and lots so you can become a super rich property investor. I do want everyone to focus here on the fact that despite the shadiness of these business practices and the discussion on whether his content is influencing people to break the law or act immorally, behaving like this is driving up the price of rents everywhere. And this one specific act is basically removing any kind of affordable private housing in this country. It's absolutely despicable. But wait, it gets worse. Rent to rent is pretty awful, but rent to serviced accommodation is basically worse for absolutely everybody, and I'll explain why. This kind of completely unregulated subletting is when you rent a property and then rent that out for short stays. Basically, doing an Airbnb without owning the property yourself. And of course, you could just advertise the property you're renting on Airbnb because these websites actively encourage it. And let's not forget that Airbnb still allows listings for properties in illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank in Palestine. So that's a good indicator as to what kind of morality the people on the board of Airbnb have, isn't it? There are entire campaigns in various neighborhoods in Greater Manchester to end Airbnbs and other kinds of serviced accommodation properties. There are entire apartment buildings in my area that have no Airbnb policies and encourage residents to report landlords and apartments that they suspect of being used for or using Airbnb. What we've found in Manchester, in places like Moss Side and Harper Hay, people are coming in from wealthier areas to rent out Airbnbs for stag do's, hen do's, Christmas parties, but what ends up happening is they trash the local area, get into fight with residents, make a bunch of noise, end up basically using up all the car parking spaces so kids can't play in the area, and this kind of thing just generally contributes to working class people being priced out of the area that they grew up in, meaning that properties that other people in the area need for housing are taken up and used for profit, so they have to leave their family and friends and neighbors behind because the only place they can afford to live is being rented out and subsequently used for short stay accommodation for loud obnoxious twats who piss on cars and do hate crimes. But Samuel Leeds loves to promote this practice. It's what's known as Rent to SA, an unfortunate acronym there, but let's move past that. He's not bothered about the effects this kind of thing has on a local community, he's just interested in profits and cash. Here's one of his videos with one of his students where she's basically admitting to the fact that what she's doing is legally sketchy according to the letting agent the landlord used for the property.
However, the agent then turned around to me and said, we can't do this because our legal team won't allow it. But the landlord still wants to go ahead.
But because the landlord lives in Dubai and is super hands-off, he agreed to it, and now she's raking it in. I love how in the kitchen she has the champagne out and a Tesco value charcuterie board. There's no way she's doing that for every single guest. It's completely absurd.
Oh, this is nice. the balcony. You can literally see the Winchester Cathedral.
Yes.
Okay, so this just says everything about Samuel's brand. It's exaggerating stuff so that people get impressed and think his awful business practices are sage advice. You can't see anything from that balcony. It's useless. Unless you want to smoke a spliff somewhere that you won't get thrown out, but you need to get super faded because you're in Winchester for a family meal or something, because I can't think of any other reason why you'd want to go to bleed in Winchester. Rent-to-serviced accommodation is lucrative because, as this woman says, she can rent the place out for £200 a night. And when she's paying £1,500 a month, in theory, she could rent the place out every night in a month and make nearly £5,000 in profit. A family with 2 working parents could live in that house. But instead, they're going to struggle to find somewhere to live, because Samuel and his landlord influencer pals are encouraging people to do stuff like rent-to-serviced accommodation all over the country. It's horrific. Samuel's other general content is also just absolutely detestable. Here's one of his latest videos talking about how he's absolutely buzzing that the UK government have decided to prevent councils from charging council tax per room in HMOs.
I said this would happen, man! This is the naughty trick that the councils and the government have been doing to hurt my HMOs and some of my students. You're having to pay council tax on every room. So now your profit, that was £2 a month, is now almost half. Now it's like £1,000. So it's really hurting. I swear that they were just after me and my students. I felt like I was being victimised at times. And I also think they were only doing it to landlords where they knew that that particular HMO was really profitable. And they just picked that one. You know, so it was quite unfair.
I love the language he uses here to act as if landlords are some kind of oppressed underclass. It's the same kind of recuperation of leftist language that racists use to accuse BLM of being racist to whites. He's also trying to claim that the government were attempting to do some kind of landlord oppression here. God, I wish. When in fact, 115 MPs in the House of Commons have declared earning income from rental properties. 90 of them Conservatives, who are the party that is in power at the minute. And who's the biggest landlord of them all? The bastard king!
And this is something that I talked about very loudly to my students, and we campaigned and we wrote to the councils and we pushed, and we've been pushing for a long time.
Oh, did you have to do some campaigning and you fought really hard? Well, let me talk to you about some campaigning. The Renters Reform Coalition have been campaigning since 2022 to get the government to commit to their 2019 election campaign promise of ending Section 21 evictions. A type of eviction a landlord like Samuel can use to just evict someone out of their property for no reason at all. They're also known as no-fault evictions. These kinds of evictions are also responsible for 25% of households either being homeless or at risk of being homeless, even according to the government's own data. In May, we went down to Westminster and were promised by Rachel McLean, the housing minister, that they would be gone by October. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's Christmas, Rachel!
What's being put forward is that the new law will be that HMOs are banded as just one council tax to pay.
So in effect, the government has stopped local councils from getting a bit of money from landlords who currently are charging on average £1,000 a month for rents outside of London and £2,200 a month inside it. Yes, that is a great win for landlords. But you're not really making any progress in making us sympathise with their position, are you? And of course, Samuel uses that old landlord lie of creating affordable housing and refers to the UK housing crisis as there not being enough houses. Yeah, I wonder why there aren't enough houses for people. Nothing to do with the way that your content more broadly affects the housing crisis. Despite the fact that increased garbage levels and use of services in the local area from people living in HMOs, whether they have a kitchenette in their room or not, will amount to using council services which cost money, the council is probably bankrupt, as most outside London are due to a lack of funding from Westminster. And it's funny he actually refers to Dudley Council in this one video, one of the most broke councils in the country. This then encourages councillors and council leaders who are more focused on profitability than sustainability to sell off vast swaths of council land, which then big developers who buy that land build massive buildings on, and then sell the buildings to building management companies, who then sell each individual flat in the property to landlords, who then rent out their flats to people who watch Samuel Leeds content, who do rent-to-rent and rent-to-serviced accommodation, gentrifying and ruining local communities with pollution, high rents, transient attitudes, and absolutely no green spaces. No, Samuel, you are not solving the housing crisis. You are contributing to it. You're a bastard. That land could be used to build more council homes. It could be used to build supermarkets and doctors' clinics for people in isolated communities. But no, you're happy to drive councils to make abhorrent decisions so that you can continue to profit off other people's hard work. And if you want any other proof that this guy is an absolute loser, that's right, he's a debate pervert. Love all these videos of him debating renters. Yeah, this is definitely good and not an opportunity to teach his many followers on how to shut down arguments about high rents and extortionate behaviour from landlords. Samuel's best performing video is a video of him debating Andrew Tate. On what? I have absolutely no idea, but the thumbnail seems to imply a debate with the words Leeds versus Tate. I don't know if that's the actual content because I genuinely can't be arsed to watch these two men blow smoke up each other's arse for almost an hour. But the title itself says interview, so that's a bit confusing. Also, is this playing on Tate's fighting career in some way, exaggerating the content to be some kind of a fight between the two? Samuel does love to exaggerate. Anyway, Samuel seems to understand this kind of content is popular, as a lot of his content seems to have a misogynist air to it, especially this video from his Twitter.
Grown men ask me about hacks on work-life balance. Let me tell you something about work-life balance. Work-life balance as a concept was only introduced to the world in the 80s and 90s, where women were suddenly expected to have to go to work and have jobs, as well as being mothers, housewives, and. This is not a concept for grown-ass men. So if you're a grown-ass man asking me, what do I think about work-life balance? It doesn't exist. Grow up.
What? Then, as I alluded to earlier, of course, in his blog post, he talks about Russell Brand being innocent until proven guilty.
There's a lot I need to say about this, as this goes way beyond Russell Brand as a single individual. This is about important truths that are shaping our society. If you want to get my full view on the matter, make sure to watch the video until the end. In this article, I will explain my view on the case, the wider context, and potentially why Brand is facing these claims right now.
Okay, so we're gonna get some important truths that are shaping our society.
The media often print allegations behind people that are totally unproven. They hide behind anonymous sources and selective presentation of facts to tarnish a target's reputation. The legal standard is innocent until proven guilty, and I think it should become much more of the social standard too.
So what Samuel's doing here is claiming the media, some kind of amorphous, nebulous blob entity, is making these allegations up. He's doing that because, I imagine, he loves Andrew Tate, and Andrew Tate has been on record saying the allegations against him doing literal human trafficking are made up, despite having actual charges against him from the state of Romania.
Anyone can make an accusation against someone, and the media filters those claims to their own biases and agendas, particularly where the alleged activity is serious. Quoting anonymous sources isn't enough information for the public to assess the evidence. We should wait for a court to rule before making any judgments against Russell.
The thing Samuel isn't quite getting here is that the media isn't filtering claims through their own biases and agenda. They're reporting on literal women who have told the world how this man has behaved and what he has done. Those are the bare bones and facts of the matter. I want to stress that there are still no charges against Russell Brand, and he is still making content and has been since these allegations were made public. He has not suffered in any way from this. What has been achieved is that women everywhere are now aware of how this man has harmed and hurt people, and can therefore avoid him and scrutinise him in a way that will hopefully lead to less people being harmed.
Adding to the media's commercial agenda to put out sensational stories to pull in an audience, there is also the targeting of people whose views challenge the current political narrative. We've seen time and time again that when someone has views that do not align with the current agenda, they're branded with terms like conspiracy theorist. Sometimes when that fails, they are subject to these types of criminal allegations as well.
Okay, so this is really annoying. Let's take an example of a conspiracy theorist that Russell Brand basically apes for his own content, who also is extremely popular and has absolutely zero allegations of a similar nature against him. Joe Rogan. It's that easy. Joe Rogan. Over the years of Joe Rogan peddling his garbage, confidently wrong opinions about pseudoscience, politics, and other topics, he has not once been accused of anything that would deem him a sexual predator. Just to be clear, Joe Rogan has definitely said some horrible things about women, and it is definitely possible that he could harm women and other members of society. But what Samuel's implying here is that the media just make stuff up when conspiracy theorists get too popular. And no, that's not happened. So that's that.
Russell Brand worked with mainstream media for many years. In all that time, they didn't publish any claims of this severity about him. But something changed. He started calling them out and talking against powerful elite interests. Now suddenly stories from many years ago are dug up.
This is something that's truly disgusting to read from a British person specifically. As most of us know, Jimmy Savile was a prolific sex offender, and the establishment knew this and did nothing to hold him to account for his crimes because he was an extremely powerful man in show business who made a lot of money for a lot of people. And of course, he supported establishment politicians in their vile destruction of working class people's rights. The people who worked with Brand in television and film didn't say anything for similar reasons. Sure, Brand has a distaste for mainstream media and is probably less conservative than Jimmy Savile, but he's definitely profitable for television companies and executives. I would absolutely hold Channel 4 and various other companies he worked with to account for not calling this stuff out, and I'd also say that they're responsible in a large way for the harm that was done to Russell's victims. But that's the relation that capital has to rape culture, misogyny, and patriarchy in a nutshell, really.
Russell Brand has been talking about everything from COVID lockdowns to the World Economic Forum's Great Reset on his YouTube channel. The mainstream media have attempted to discredit him, but his influence continues to grow. Now they've moved to publishing sexual assault claims against him. Even the recent Channel 4 documentary about these allegations mention his conspiracy theories, perhaps pointing towards the true agenda of their program. When you speak out, you gain enemies in high places, so it's especially important to give the benefit of the doubt to dissident voices such as Russell. We should all be skeptical of media reports and demand that claims be proven before we believe them. When the media publish allegations, particularly from anonymous sources, we shouldn't take their word for it. We have the power to think for ourselves and make our own minds up. Let's use that power!
This one's just so rich that I don't even know where to begin. The enemies in high places that Samuel's talking about here, billionaires and other vile ruling class individuals, are not remotely bothered by the nonsense that Russell Brand talks about. The people in those positions of power are absolutely fine with people dying from going to work without proper COVID protections. The unquestioning submission to labor and lack of support for disabled and sick people is what makes billionaires profits. What's even more completely bizarre is that one of the main aims of the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset is that you will own nothing and be happy. It's one of the main things that conspiracy nuts love to talk about. But Samuel himself quotes Nelson Rockefeller in one of his silly little pamphlets with the phrase, "The secret to success is to own nothing but control everything." So which is it, Samuel? Do you hate the idea, or do you actively promote it and take part in it? Some of your videos, after all, seem to promote the idea of earning an income from property without owning any property at all. Hypocrisies and debunking aside, can you imagine if you knew that this man was your landlord and you were a woman who is a victim of rape culture, misogyny, victim blaming, and other such vile patriarchal things? Not only is Samuel in a huge position of power as a millionaire property owner and landlord, but he also benefits from the power dynamics that serve cisgender, white, heterosexual men in our society. I would be f***ing terrified. All in all, this guy seems like a proper bastard. Are there any redeeming qualities about him? Well, I do like to be fair in any kind of criticism I give to people, no matter how disgusting and evil some of the things they do are. So let's take a look at some of the charity work that Samuel talks about on his YouTube channel. The Samuel Leeds Foundation does exist, and you can find the, again, very badly designed and optimized website online. It's also on the Charity Commission, which a charity needs to be on in order to operate as a charity in the UK. On the Charity Commission website, it says that the charity provides grants to individuals and organisations and provides services, advocacy and advice for the prevention or relief of poverty in Uganda, Zambia, Tanzania and England and Wales? Hang on a minute, I thought it said in his little pamphlet that he was doing charity stuff in Africa. What's he doing in England and Wales? Well, I guess we'll probably find out as we dive deeper into this. We won't. On the website, we get a bit of an idea about some of the things the foundation is doing in Africa, in Uganda particularly. This is listed as building schools, water, and hospitals. But we're going to look at it chronologically, as Samuel has posted stuff relating to Africa on his YouTube channel. The first video Samuel posted about anything relating to charity in Africa is entitled Charity Project Africa, and it was published on the 27th of April 2017. And is extremely vague. He talks about how he and his wife have gone all over Africa and they do so every year, and sometimes he randomly chooses people to give £100 or £150 to, who he thinks deserves it. So, like, I don't know, just being a kind of generally generous person, I know I'm always buzzing when I get £100 or £150 or more donated to me on my stream or in my Patreon, but I'm also extremely acutely aware that I need that kind of money every month. It has to be consistent, especially as that is my job. So it is pretty nice and generous, but one-off donations aren't really the life-changing events that he's making them out to be here. I mean, I'm talking about my experience, and I live in the comfortable imperial core. He's doing this in Uganda. He then goes into some ideas he's just farting out about what he could do with the money that you donate to the project. There's some stuff about boreholes and wells and clothes for orphan children, but none of this appears to materialize in any of Samuel's other content. And as far as I can tell, the charity he's getting you to donate to in this particular video is not the Samuel Leeds Foundation. It's a limited company called Good News All Round Limited, of which he is a co-founder. And his brother and another family member, Anna, who appears to have designed the website, are members of the team. So, not a registered charity. And we can't really assume by any stretch of the imagination that any of the work being done by that company is charity work. Interestingly enough, I couldn't find the company Good News All Round Limited on Companies House, the register of limited companies on the gov.uk website. Nor could I find Good New All Round Limited, which appears to be a misspelling of the original company name with the copyright logo just slapped next to it. The Samuel Leeds Foundation's actual charity work seems to begin with water, which is arguably one of the biggest issues in poverty-stricken areas and countries. It says on the website that the foundation has built some water tanks and boreholes. But where? It just says in Uganda and Zambia. Uganda is twice the size of the UK, and Zambia is almost 6 times the size of the UK in terms of square kilometers. So we have to assume here that the Samuel Leeds Foundation didn't build the Ugandan and Zambian boreholes. So where are they? Well, on May 9th, 2017, Samuel published a video entitled Samuel Leeds Africa Project. It's barely got any views compared to his other bits of content and has about 6 comments, just like the previous charity video, with this rather embarrassing one where Samuel gets a commenter's name wrong and also asks where he is on his journey to financial freedom, with no response. Cringe. Anyway, in this video, Samuel appears to travel to a village or a school in Uganda with no interviews with any of the people there, and he just kind of tells us some stuff about the place that he's at. He says a lot of stuff that could easily be true about the place, that lots of the children are orphans, that they don't have a lot of food or resources. None of it is verified by the people there, but it's clear that the village is suffering with resources, particularly in water collection. And again, he doesn't tell us where this is. I also don't think he asks anyone in the video what their names are at any point. He even refers to the guy giving him the tour as the boat rider.
Worry, because we have a boat. And we have a boat rider.
Not even correctly identifying the fact that he drives the boat, not just rides it. Regardless, we see that the village has one water tank to collect rain, and it's controlled by one person in the village. Pretty dire stuff. At the end of the video, Samuel says that he's planning to build a massive water tank that will serve 4 villages in the area. Sounds pretty neat, big up lad, gotta give him that, or do we? Another interesting point in the video description here is that it says, over the last 5 years, Samuel has invested much time and resource into rural villages across Zambia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. To get involved, please get in touch by emailed info@samuelleeds.com. So, 5 years prior to 2017, he's been spending time and resources in Africa. What, the 100 or 150 pound one-off donos that he's been giving to random people who he thinks deserve it just while he's been on holiday? The Charity Commission says that the charity was founded in 2019, 2 years after this video was made. I mean, granted, it wasn't that popular and not a lot of people wanted to get involved. It's not Samuel's fault that all of his audience are vile capitalists who don't care about starving and thirsty people in Africa and would actually much rather focus on shafting people in their own country. Actually, it is. But it's just all a bit of a stretch. There's a few more videos of him in Uganda, like this super long one where Samuel has to duck out after the first day due to a pretty severe rafting accident. But his brother Russell, his business partner, and some of his students go on his behalf back to the village and another one nearby it to assess the situation and see where £5,000 that Samuel has set aside for them would be best spent. Again, this is all done prior to the charity being founded, as this video is in 2018, not 2019. In this video, it's claimed that Samuel has installed water tanks, plural, in the village with the help of Charles, a local man who does work in the area to help feed the people there, and the first Ugandan person to actually be named in one of his videos. What's interesting here, though, is the plural tanks, as according to this man in the video, the village has 2 water tanks, and when Samuel visited this place in his previous video, there was already one there. Okay, so we know that Samuel has put 1 water tank there, but not 2. You can't claim that he's put 2 water tanks in or more than 1 water tank. There's that exaggeration again. Later in the video, there is an event for entrepreneurs hosted by students and Samuel's brother Russell, where afterwards they awarded business grants to 5 people there. So that explains the grants part of the charity, but what exactly are these grants being given out for? What exactly are these businesses? Are they going to be landlords? Property investors? Rent-to-rent landlords? The thoughts are sickening that this charity that is supposed to be preventing or alleviating poverty is actually financing awful landlords in a different country that has already got its own share of problems. Russell explains at the end of the video that they could see the vast improvements to the village after the first water tank was put in by the foundation. So they're going to put in another water tank and a borehole. Pretty good stuff. Let's hope it's enough to get all the villagers water this time. In this video from 2019, he goes to a plantation in Uganda where the owner wants to give him land for free in order to build a school on there. So this is where the building schools part of the charity work comes in. This particular line from Samuel knocks me absolutely sick.
But the reason we want to build a school is because education is absolutely everything, and if people know how to be entrepreneurs and know how to make money, then what happens is you make money from being valuable, and by being valuable, more people that are valuable to a society, that's what really relieves poverty. So
he also goes to various schools and realizes quickly that actually instead of building a new school, he should try to help existing schools become better. There's a lot of white saviorism going on here as Samuel criticizes this one school for holding classes under a tree and wants to build them some school buildings instead. It's not really confirmed that this is something that the teachers or the kids want. He then has a meeting with the government who, surprisingly to no one but him, want to absolutely back him in introducing business education and finance education to the curriculum in all schools in Uganda. My soul shudders at the thought of these kids in Uganda being taught from an early age to destroy any possibility of comfortable and affordable housing for their classmates. On top of this, at the end of the video, Samuel travels to the village where in the last video, his business partner, brother and students said they had decided to put in another water tank and a borehole. The man from before drops the absolute bombshell that there are still only 2 water tanks in the village.
So we have over like 100 people that use the 2 tanks so far.
So what's going on? Was that just a lie? Were they not able to do it in time? It's been an entire year, and in the last video, it was in 2017, and he went back in 2018, the new water tank had been put in, so what gives? There's another video on his YouTube channel that seems to be the launch video for his charity, and it actually kind of explains the boreholes thing, of which we've seen 0 so far. He says in the video that he went to a village in Zambia in 2009, where he observed similar problems. Again, just want to mention, these villages and places that he went to are not named, just that he went to Zambia and relocated an entire village. No explanation of how, just that he did it. Okay, guess we'll have to take your word for it then, bro. And put a borehole water well in. However, in this video, he uses footage from the previous Uganda trip. Okay, I can let this one go because in 2009, I don't think Samuel was doing any kind of content creation, probably not doing YouTube at all, but it's still confusing and unclear as to whether similar boreholes have been put in the villages in Uganda, and again, there's no mention of Kenya or Tanzania either. In this video, we also learned Samuel's reason for not registering the charity until 2019. He said he wanted to directly help the people of Africa using his own business profits, an extremely generous thing to do. However, it's questionable as to what benefit there is to be had by, for all intents and purposes, cancelling out all the good he's doing on the continent by selling his awful business practices to kids in Africa. People are homeless in every country, and by all estimations and data, evictions, landlords, and unaffordable housing are the main reason. I will also draw attention to this article from 2020, which broadly indicates that a few countries in Africa, including Uganda, have seen examples of fecal contamination, yes, that's poop in the water, from boreholes. In this study, the boreholes that were examined in Uganda exceeded the World Health Organization's standards for healthy clean drinking water by around 19%. There are also unhealthy amounts of other chemicals that have been measured as well. In another paper titled "Borehole Water Could Be a Health Risk to Rural Communities" in 2019 by S. Town Amaso et al., the researchers discovered that in a survey of 125 boreholes in the Thulumela local municipality in the Vembe district, Limpopo province of South Africa between 2014 and 2015, only 12 of the 125 boreholes were found to be functional. 7 of the 12 boreholes were positive for total coliform counts, that's the poop in the water again, and 4 were positive for E. coli counts. The reasoning for this discussed in the paper are things like poor hygiene due to a lack of education and infrastructure in rural villages, animals defecating in and around the borehole, and stagnant water where bacteria and pathogens can breed. Now, I'm certain that if Samuel wanted to, he could make sure that the boreholes that his foundation are financing are properly maintained and free from contamination. But given that we know how much he cuts costs and wants to tell people the shortcuts to financial freedom by using immoral business practices, I don't think we can be very sure that's going to be the case. He also donated £2,500 to a doctor who helped fix his leg when he had that pretty bad accident back in 2018. This is covered in a YouTube video entitled "The Doctor Who Saved My Life," where he learned that healthcare is privatized in Uganda and therefore there are thousands of people who just can't get better and even die in some cases because they can't afford treatment. £2,500 is a very generous amount to give to a doctor who wants to save some lives, but it's not exactly empowering people. I also understand the importance of starting small with projects like this. You don't want to run before you can walk. Genuinely no pun intended there. But Samuel could do so much more by using his vast wealth to lobby the government of Uganda to introduce an NHS-style service where people can fund it via taxes and then everyone can get free healthcare. To put this £2,500 into perspective for you, according to this article from April 2023, one consultation with a doctor in Uganda costs about £10. So realistically, he's only really paid for 250 people to have a consultation with a doctor. That's a drop in the ocean considering the broad strokes of what this study in 2021 had to say, which is that the biggest problem for Ugandans isn't even the cost of healthcare. It's the ability to even get to a clinic in the first place, with 70% of Ugandans an hour's walk from the nearest hospital. That figure increases to 90% with the use of a bicycle. But what if you're too sick to cycle? What if you've got an injury that prevents you from doing that? What if you've got an injury that prevents you from walking? On the website, it claims that £2,500 was an initial fund and people's lives are being saved with this fund. There is nothing from what I have seen that Samuel has done for the healthcare system of Uganda that adequately empowers Ugandans to get more access to healthcare. Just like his other content, his contribution is exaggerated to make him out to be a much better person than he is. Yeah, that video is starting to look a bit like those videos where influencers give money to the homeless, innit? To be fair to Samuel and the foundation, in this tweet from the Ginger Regional Referral Hospital from October this year, they say that the foundation made a donation of £188,000, 900 million Ugandan shillings, in order to build a 64-bed capacity orthopedic ward. That's again a huge donation and supremely generous. It just begs the question of how these Ugandans who won't be able to walk or cycle are gonna get there, let alone afford to go there. Ginger is just one city in Uganda, and the places the hospital covers are very far from the hospital itself. And again, it's just one corner of this massive country, even at that. It's not looking great, but there is one last video that I want to take a look at regarding his work in Africa. This is the most recent one, and in the video description it says, Samuel Leeds is investing in many properties and land across the continent of Africa. Oh god. But as well as investments that will reap a financial gain, he is also investing into the local communities. In this documentary, you'll watch a fly-on-the-wall type documentary discovering the ups and downs of Samuel's adventures and investments in Uganda, Africa. From schools to scams, hotels to hospitals, Samuel experienced just about everything when traveling. The Samuel Leeds Foundation is currently building schools and hospital wards, and in this documentary, you see how it all came about. Oh, okay, great! So we're actually gonna see one of these schools that he's built. But that's not a school. That's just a school building. You can't say you're building schools when you've built a school building. It's just not accurate. Again, it's exaggerated. Stop exaggerating! Oh, and of course, his name has to be on it.
It's so good to be working with the government. We want to see all the children of the schools financially literate and have basic IT skills and finance skills, being able to understand the difference between assets and liabilities and investments. And that's why we're so excited and blessed to be here working at the schools in Uganda.
It's just really knocking me sick how he's relishing at the opportunity to be able to teach these poor kids about property investments and assets and liabilities. It's just like, oh my god, give me strength.
I really believe that Africa, there's a lot of opportunity for investment and development.
Excuse me, bro?
Right now, I'm investing in Ghana. We're doing serviced apartments that are being built as we speak. I'm a partner in that. Where we're standing in Kabali, this will be a city one day. You can buy land like this for like £3,000-4,000. Imagine how much it's gonna be in 10 years.
Oh, okay. He's literally doing neo-colonialism. I'm not being funny, but the sheer balls on this man to say with his full chest that he's taking advantage of low land prices in Africa to build serviced apartments on is just flabbergasting. Not only are these buildings not going to do anything for the people of Ghana, but serviced apartments are a joke. Whoever owns the land sells it to a property developer. The property developer builds the building, then the property developer sells it to a building management company, or they do the building management themselves. This company is probably the one that Samuel's a partner of. That company then sells the flats in the building to individuals who want to just own a flat, or landlords. But the real kicker here is that the building management company get to charge whatever they feel is necessary or whatever they can get away with in what's known as a service charge. Now you might be thinking, well, what's serviced about this accommodation? Well, they might have a gym that is very badly maintained and they don't pay cleaners to look after properly. There are so many horror stories of serviced apartments all over the UK where there are like common areas that are just basically small rooms with nothing in them. It's just something that the building management company has to have in the building in order to be able to charge a service charge. Otherwise, they can't get away with it. But the service charge is something that, unfortunately, more often than not, falls on the financial burden of a tenant. So whoever wants to rent one of these serviced apartments is going to have to take on the cost of that service charge, as the landlord is going to want to increase the rent to cover that cost. It's just completely awful. It's just a big money-making scheme. It's capitalism gone crazy, gone wild.
We're thinking, if we can build a school through our charity, maybe we could potentially build and also make some Make some money.
I'm not even remotely surprised at this point that Samuel talks quite openly about wanting to make money from Uganda whilst also wanting to build schools there. It's like he can't even do something remotely charitable without wanting to make a personal profit from it. He's just completely brain poisoned from landlord nonsense. I do want to stress here that he's a white guy buying cheap land in Uganda and then selling whatever he builds on that land for a massive profit for himself that is probably not going to benefit the people of Uganda whatsoever. It's like giving someone that you've just beaten up a couple of quid. It doesn't cancel out any of the bad stuff that you've done.
Because we came to Uganda a couple of years ago, we did a business workshop and we gave out small business loans, literally like £500. And Charles, with the money, has bought some land. So how do you make money from it?
Sorry?
How do you make money from this?
We don't make money from this because we grow food crop.
Yes.
Then the food crop we just consume
Okay.
with our children.
Yeah.
Simple.
So now we're finding out where some of those business grants have gone.
How did you afford to buy this land? Is that the land that you bought with the money that we gave you?
And maybe to finish this house.
You want to finish this house?
Yeah. To construct this house for the children.
Yeah. But it has to make profit, yeah?
Yeah.
If it doesn't make profit, it doesn't make sense.
So what we're seeing here is a white guy from England mad that a black African man wants to make a children's home for the orphans that Samuel met and used for his content in 2017, and now he's out? He's out of the project like Duncan Bannatyne in Dragon's Den?
I'm out because there's a lack of transparency on the table.
Samuel then finds out from his guide that locals have told him that Charles is actually using this place for his own house. He then tells his partner that they're being scammed. Now, I want to point out here that there is a racist trope in the UK that apparently black African men are always trying to scam charitable English white people. While it is possible that Charles is lying about wanting to build a children's home, we aren't privy to the pretext under which these grants were given out. And look, who are we to judge this guy? A guy who is pretending to be this like charitable white savior comes to his country and wants to give out free money to people. Yeah, he wants to build his dream house and live off grid. Like, good, use that white man's money. But it's also very telling just how unclear what Samuel wants to do in Uganda is to this man. As if we're assuming he's telling Samuel what he wants to hear, then he's telling him that he wants to build a children's home and he's growing crops to feed the people in the community. According to his videos, Samuel had gone to Uganda under that pretense, and so it makes sense that that would be what he wanted to hear. So it completely makes sense that Charles is confused that Samuel is unhappy of the lack of profit in his project. Well, luckily we don't see any ramifications for Charles, and I hope he gets to live out the rest of his days on his little homestead. In the rest of the video, they go back to the villages with the water tank, and no new information is discovered here. Which is bizarre, because Samuel loves to put his name on school buildings that he's built, but we don't learn about any new water tanks or boreholes that have been built in this place. That's a bit odd. He then goes to visit Dr. Jamila, the doctor who saved his life, in Ginger Hospital, where it is confirmed that the hospital covers 5 million people in its catchment area. Samuel pledges £1,000 and his students pledge another £2,000. Again, mere trickles in the rivers of need in this country, but they get some rounds of applause, so that's all good for them, isn't it? In the next bit of the video, Samuel and his students go to a school which is the only school in 75 square kilometers, according to the video, with some pretty rundown buildings. His students pledge a combination of £20,000 to improve the school buildings. Pretty neat, but these kids still have to travel 75 kilometers. At least some of them do. And in one part of the video, he talks about how even some of the teachers don't have the IT skills to use a bunch of computers that were sent to them by another charity. Why not invest in solving that problem instead? The decisions Samuel and his team make are bizarre, and in this influencer's opinion, are some pretty good media stunts to make them look like they're doing some charitable work in Africa that they can pat themselves on the back for. And let's not forget, he's doing some pretty bad stuff in Africa too. Not to mention the way he treats impoverished people in his own country. It doesn't really just make any of that stuff go away. Now, I'm not going to throw Samuel's charitable work under the bus here. He's spent a lot of money helping a lot of needy people. More money than I could even dream of earning to be able to even think about donating to charitable projects. But how sustainable is the project? It's all well and good getting pledges from your students every 6 months, but how much money are you pulling in regularly and reliably? Are there any charity events that the Samuel Leeds Foundation is going to be doing to get some more donos? Well, it turns out he did a charity boxing match with someone called Rob Moore, who I'm probably going to do a video on, based on what information I found out about him briefly while researching this video. Also, this LinkedIn post from Samuel himself seems to imply the event raised £250,000 for the charity. But how can we verify that? If 2,000 people showed up to the event like this tweet says, that means that every single person would have had to have donated £125 or more each. Seems unlikely, but then I guess Samuel does run in wealthy circles. But then actually, it also says on the event website that Rob Moore actually bet Samuel Leeds that he couldn't beat him in a boxing match and would pay £50,000 if he could. And he did beat him in a boxing match. Fair play. Oh wait, no, it says he's going to pay him £100,000. Oh no, wait, £200,000. Wait, hang on a minute. So you basically got £200,000 from this one guy? At this point, I'm far too tired to be watching this crap to try and find out the proper story. It's all just completely vague, and the lack of transparency coupled with everything that we've already covered in the video just makes me think that some of the worst things are going on here. We'll just have to wait and see what the accounts look like for 2023. Oh, you didn't know that? Oh no, yeah, you can check the accounts of a charity on the Charity Commission website. Charities have to do that in order to be able to be a registered charity in the UK. And you can actually see the Samuel Leeds Foundation charities accounts here. And you can see on this little graph here, actually, that like they didn't make a lot of money in the first 2 years of operation. But then in 2022, it skyrocketed, where they got donations of up to £106,000. And then almost the same amount of money went out of the foundation again. That's weird. I can't find anything on Twitter or Google or YouTube or LinkedIn to say that there was an event that year to raise any money for the foundation. The accounts are also not itemized, so it's not detailed where the money actually came from. It just says the gross income and the gross expenditure. It does say that £25,000 went to Uganda that year, but also £77,000 went to England and Wales. And again, I want to stress, there's no information on his YouTube or his LinkedIn or anything like that that tells us what he's doing charity-wise in England and Wales. Yes, hi, it's me. Yes, hi, it's me, Editing Mule here. So, just as I'm finishing editing this, I find out that there's a tweet from Samuel, like the day after I finished writing the script, where basically it says that he donated £5,000 to a company called Deffer. Now, if you don't know what Deffer is, Double Down News did a pretty good video about it, about how they install boilers, heating stuff, plumbing, all that kind of nature of stuff for disabled and sick and elderly people who can't afford it. So that's pretty nice. But to be clear, Deffer is a community interest company. And what that means is that it's still a private company, a limited company, but it just basically doesn't have private investment shares and stuff like that. So, but on Deffer's website itself, there are a bunch of caveats that you have to fulfill in order to be able to get access to its help. It is, of course, a very worthy cause, but it's questionable as to how far that £5,000 is going to go. To be clear, we shouldn't have charities like this in the UK. People shouldn't have boilers failing on them, and over 65-year-old pensioners shouldn't be having to pay to get things like that replaced anyway. The fact that this charity exists is a pretty damning indictment on the state of things in the UK, and it kind of makes me wonder just how many people who are over 65 years old have boiler problems in Samuel's properties. Contributing a little bit of money to what is arguably not the solution to these kinds of problems, while you yourself may be causing some of the problems, is just kind of like really on brand for Samuel, as per usual. Back to the video. The long and short of what I can gather is going on here is that Samuel feels an immense pressure to try and make people's lives better due to the guilt he carries knowing that he's making people's lives worse in his own country. So he exports that guilt to another country where he has no connections or community in order to make himself feel better about the stuff he does in his own. Putting his name on school buildings, water tanks, telling people that he moved an entire village with his own bare hands. Obviously, he didn't actually say that, but it's just funny to imagine that in my head, that that's like what he thinks he's done, or that he thinks he can get away with telling people that he did it. He doesn't really understand the meaning of the word empowering, because that's definitely not what he's doing for the people of Africa where he conducts his charity work. To be fair to him, he is trying, and to say he's done nothing in Africa would be a lie. But the things he has done and wants to do are questionable as to the effect they would have on the people in the places he is doing and wants to do them in. And the harm he may be causing by teaching a new generation of kids to destroy each other's livelihoods by poisoning the brain with landlord nonsense, plus investing in developments that are definitely going to harm the local population, just kind of cancels out this already problematic charity stuff. Anyway, look, this video wasn't even supposed to be about Samuel Leeds. Initially, it was supposed to be about a bunch of different landlord influencer bastards. It just ended up being about himself because there's just so much dubious stuff that he does. And I'm not going to waste any more time here speculating about the legitimacy and the impact of his charity work, because you could Google Samuel Leeds charity lies and up comes a thread where people are talking about this exact stuff on a website called Property Tribes. What also comes up is a crowd justice fundraiser for Vanessa Warwick, one of the co-founders of Property Tribes, who claims that Samuel is suing her for defamation that's allegedly on her website, in which she details all the time Samuel has been in the media for his shady business practices, and mentions the time one of his students, an army vet by the name of Danny Butcher, took his own life after getting into £13,000 of debt after listening to Samuel's advice. Yeah, that bit I did at the start, where I was playing on the what could go wrong trope, not an exaggeration. I'd err on the side of caution in saying that I'm not worried about getting a defamation case sent my way as a result of this video. But it seems like Scamuel, as people on Property Tribes like to call him, has already got a lot of legal stuff on his plate already. So hopefully he'll see the reality that everything in this video has been double checked to make sure that it's all just actual information that he's posted about himself online, and the things that I've quoted or paraphrased from other people is their opinion. The subjective views that I take in this video are my opinion, and therefore it'd be a waste of time and money anyway. I hope. A lot of you might be thinking, wow, this is awful. What can we do about people like Samuel? And the answer is, as it is with a lot of things, organising. We can't end someone like Samuel's career, and even if we could, he's made enough money to live comfortably for the rest of his life. And even if we could take that away from him, I don't necessarily agree that that would make the world actively better anyway. The video I showed a clip of at the start of this video is from December 2022, when me and some comrades from our great union, Greater Manchester Tenants Union, attempted to stop Greater Manchester Police, Manchester City Council bailiffs, and Jigsaw Housing from illegally breaking in to one of our members' houses to evict him. GMP assaulted us and facilitated the illegal break-in anyway, where subsequently our member was forced out into sub-zero temperatures as no attempt had been made to find temporary accommodation for him by Jigsaw Housing. We would be far better equipped and able to prevent such overreaches of the law in the future if we had more members, more funding, and a higher social profile. So everything I do in this forthcoming video series is going to be promoting our union and others all over the country. Helping tenants and other people in the tenant class understand their rights is extremely empowering, and supporting them in disputes against their landlords with direct action and collective bargaining is what we do at GMTU. Other tenants unions like London Renters Union and Community Action Tenants Union in Ireland do similar incredible work. There are lots of other smaller tenants unions popping up all over the UK, in Peterborough, Lancaster and Southampton, and they could all do with your help. Please consider joining, donating and volunteering with your local tenants union, as we can empower each other by growing tenant power and fighting back against gentrification, greedy landlords and incompetent social housing providers all over the country. There will be links in the description to each union that I have mentioned. Samuel Leeds may think he empowers people with charity, but it can only go so far, as this article from the Metro illustrates. It's about a woman who helped house a homeless person for 2 weeks over Christmas, not thinking more broadly about the fact that sub-zero temperatures are actually now more likely to be seen in as late as March in the UK. The man even says in the article, "I am stuck in a vicious circle of not being able to find a job because I have no permanent address." So the effort, although respectable, was in vain. This Christmas, we truly must think about what it means to be charitable and to help others around us. Charity is good, but it means that the person in charge makes the decisions, and those decisions aren't always good. But solidarity, community, and togetherness is great. It's always great. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope I helped you learn something or made you laugh, or at the very least I was background noise while you played a nice little video game or something. If any of those things are true, please like, comment and subscribe. It really helps me out. And also consider joining the Patreon. All of my videos are made possible by my wonderful patrons, and there are various benefits to joining the Patreon as mentioned earlier in the video. Don't forget to follow my Twitch channel, and you can also check out more content from me on my VOD channel where all my past streams are stored. Have a fantastic holiday season, an incredible new year, and as always, love, solidarity, and peace. I'll see you in the next one.